My name is Brother Cephas, and my reader today is Brother Shafiq. This is Bible in Plain View, the opportunity for you to come and receive the Word of God. The Bible seen to you where you can actually see it in its plainest way. Today, the title of the class is The Israelites' Black History Through the Bible. Now, we're not talking about black history as far as, your Harriet Tubman or your Frederick Douglass. Instead, we're going to go into the Bible and identify actual people and see how we, as a black people, existed and have a heritage, have an identity, rather than African American. So, we're going to pick this up in Genesis chapter 10. Genesis chapter 10. We're going to go to verse 1 and see where all the lineages actually came about, because right after the flood, all you had left was Noah and his 3 sons, which were Ham, Shem, and Japheth. So we're going to pick it up at Genesis chapter 10 and at verse 1. When you get there, go ahead and read, please.
Now these are the generations of the sons of Noah: Shem, Ham, Japheth, and unto them were sons born after the flood.
Go ahead.
The son of Japheth, Gomer, and Magog, and Madai, and Javan, and Tubal, and Meshach, and Tyrus.
Now, jump down to verse 5.
By these were the isles of the Gentiles divided in their lands, every one after his tongue, after their families, in their nation.
Now, when you're looking at Japheth and his generations, we didn't go through all of them. We just went to the first verses of them. But, for example, you have Javan. That's your Greeks. So when we're talking about the Isles of the Gentiles, we're talking about your European nations, quote unquote, your white people. They went up north after the flood. Like it said in verse 5, it says, these were the Isles of the Gentiles divided in their lands, everyone after his tongue, after their families, in their nations. Now, your German people, they don't have the same language as your Greek, but they're of the same lineage. And we're going to learn that about every form of people. Go ahead and read verse 6.
And the sons of Ham, Cush, and Mizraim, and Phut, and Canaan.
So it says in verse 6, and the sons of Ham, now we're talking about a different son. First we talked about Japheth, now we're getting to Ham. And his sons were Cush, and Mizraim, and Phut, and Canaan. Now, these names are interchangeable with nationalities we can identify today. For example, Mizraim, that's your Egyptians. That was their original name. Cush, that's your Ethiopians. We can look this up in history and tie it in together, solidifying, how real the Bible is, really. So we're going to go to our first reference here, which is Zondervan Compact Bible Dictionary. We're going to page 213. And we're going to look up Ham. Because when we came to Genesis, it was giving you the first generation of Ham's sons. Cush, Mizraim, and Phut, and Canaan. We know that your Gentiles are the Europeans. So we're going to learn something about Ham and his people. So in the Zondervan Compact Bible Dictionary, looking at page 213 under the name Ham. And it reads, Ham, the youngest son of Noah, born probably about 96 years before the flood, and one of the 8 persons that lived through the flood. Is talking to the Bible here. You know that God wiped out everyone else and saved nothing but 8 souls and some animals. Then it says, he became the progenitor of the dark races, your black people. Now it says, he became your progenitors of the dark races, not the Negroes. Why would he have to say that? Because it says right here, he became the progenitor of the dark races, not the Negroes, but the Egyptians, Ethiopians, Libyans, and Canaanites. Like we're reading the first generation of Ham's sons, there were black people of Ham's lineage. However, Zondervan came to the point to have to point out the fact that Negroes do not identify under the lineage of Ham. What we're going to learn, however, is that the Negroes come under the lineage of Shem. So if you have black people who identify under the father, which is Ham. Then we have a second group of black people, a mixed multitude, named the Negroes. And they had to point them out simply because they are black also, but don't get it confused. Yes, they are black, but they are not Hamites. They're not Africans. They're not Cushites. They're not Ethiopians. They are Negroes, a.k.a. Israelites, which we're going to learn today, but they're not Africans. So from here, we're going to turn over to Genesis chapter 42. Because in Shem, generations later, you had Nahor. And then afterwards, he begat Terah, and Terah begot Abraham. Abraham begot Isaac, the child of the covenant, the promised child. And he had Jacob and Esau. And from Jacob, his name was changed to Israel. And that's how we get the Israelites. We're going to see the Israelites' interaction with the Egyptians, of black people. So we're going to turn over to Genesis chapter 42. And we're going to pick it up at verse 1. We're just run down the history of these Israelites, a black people found and identified in the Bible, who we are today. So Genesis chapter 42, and we're going to pick it up at verse 1. When you get there, go ahead and read, please.
Now when Jacob saw that there was corn in Egypt, Jacob said unto his sons, why do you look one upon another?
Now, a little background information. There was a famine in the land. The sons of Jacob had already sold Joseph into slavery into to the Midianites, which sent him into Egypt because of jealousy. Then Joseph worked his way up, became, second right hand, or the right hand of Pharaoh, ruler over all the land. And because he interpreted a dream where there was going to be first plentiful harvest in the land, and then there would be a great famine. And Joseph was watching over all this. Now, since there was a famine, Jacob is talking to his sons, and he's like, now Jacob saw that there was corn in Egypt. Jacob said unto his sons, why do you look one upon another? Keep going.
And he said, behold, I have heard that there is corn in Egypt. Get you down thither, and buy for us from thence, that we may live and not die.
So Jacob is instructing his sons, go ahead and go down there, get us some corn, because we need this in order to live. Go ahead.
And Joseph's 10 brethren went down to buy corn in Egypt. But Benjamin, Joseph's brother, Jacob, sent not with his brethren. For he said, lest peradventure mischief befall him.
Now, their first son, Jacob's first son theoretically had died already. In his mind, Joseph had died. And he didn't want this same result to come unto Benjamin. So you know what? Benjamin, you stay behind. You other 12, get on, go get the corn. Keep going.
And the sons of Israel came to buy corn among those that came, for the famine was in the land of Canaan. And Joseph was the governor over the land, and it was that sold to all the people of the land.
And I just gave you background information on that, but you can read it on your own time. Go ahead.
And Joseph's brethren came and bowed down themselves before with their faces to the earth. Before him with their faces to the earth.
Go ahead.
And Joseph saw his brethren, and he knew them.
So when Joseph saw his brothers come before him, and keep in mind, they went all the way down to Egypt. He saw his brethren, and he recognized them. Go ahead.
But made himself strange unto them.
But he acted like he didn't know them. He was trying to play it off all cool, like, maybe they didn't recognize Joseph right off the bat. Let's see what happened.
And spake roughly unto them. And he said unto them, whence come ye? And they said, from the land of Canaan to buy food. And Joseph knew his brethren, but they knew not him.
Now that's crazy. So if the Israelites were a group of white people, and the Egyptians, what we have read, are black people, if Joseph was a white man, and his own people came and looked upon him, it'd be easy to point Joseph out like, yo, that's my brother right there. He's a white guy in the midst of all these black people. But instead, what's going on is that Joseph looked upon his brothers and he recognized them. But they could not point him out from the crowds. In their eyes, it's just another Egyptian ruler. Because it's black and other black people interacting with one another. Jump down to verse 21. Now, after he done, they came before Joseph. Now Joseph is just like, who are y'all? And they're giving their spiel about how they came from the land of Canaan. Their father sent him, and we're trying to get some food for our people. And it's like, it's 11 of us, but really there's 12. There's one back there. And Joseph's saying these guys are spies. He's calling them spies, and in order to, get anything from you got to prove yourself. Now, verse 21.
And they said one to another, we are verily guilty concerning our brother, in that we saw the anguish of his soul when he besought us, and we would not hear. Therefore is this distress come upon us.
And they're reflecting on back when originally they were trying to kill Joseph, but instead, they sold him off into slavery. And they're reflecting on this. It's just like, well, guess what? Since we did that in the past, now it's coming back to bite us. Keep going.
And Reuben answered them, saying, Spake I not unto you, saying, Do not sin against the child, and ye will not hear. Therefore, behold, also his blood is required.
Right.
And they knew not that Joseph understood them.
Right, because evidently they're speaking their own Hebrew language, and they're thinking, well, we'll talk amongst ourselves. They don't, we're around Egyptians. They don't know what we're talking about. They don't know our language. So they're talking amongst themselves, speaking their own language, and they knew not that Joseph understood them. Go ahead.
For he spake unto them by an interpreter.
Now he's trying to be even more slick. First, he didn't even try to play it off like he knew them. Then he brought an interpreter there to, to talk in between them. And he says, and they knew not that Joseph understood them, for he spake unto them by an interpreter. So Joseph understood this Hebrew language. He knew the language. He was a Hebrew. That's his people. But they felt within themselves, the Israelites, the other sons, they could talk their own language, and they wouldn't be, found out. But Joseph knew exactly what was going on. Why? Because he was still a Hebrew, and he was a black person. Even though he was ruling and in the midst of Egypt, not necessarily ruling, but, he wasn't powered. He was still a Hebrew, and he was able to blend in with the people there, the people of the land, of black people. So from here, we're going to turn over to Genesis chapter 50, because eventually, Joseph did reveal to them who he was, and he had him bring his people down, or he had him bring his father down, everybody down. I'm gonna take care of y'all while y'all down in Egypt. But sooner down the line, Jacob's father had passed. Oh, Joseph's father has passed, which was Jacob. He had passed away, and his request was to Joseph that, listen, you bear me, among my fathers in the land of Canaan. So that's where they ended up going. And we're going to go to Genesis chapter 50, and we're going to pick it up at verse 5. And when you get there, go ahead and read, please.
My father made me swear, saying, Lo, I die, in my grave which I have digged for me in the land of Canaan.
Mm-hmm.
There shalt thou bury me. Now therefore let me go up, and I pray thee. Let me go up, I pray thee, and bury my father, and I will come again.
So you see Joseph here making the plea to Pharaoh, saying, now therefore let me go, I pray thee, and bury my father, and I will come again. Because like I said, Jacob's request is that he be buried amongst his forefathers. And now Joseph making that plea towards Pharaoh. Said, go up. And then Pharaoh basically agreed, said, go up and bury thy father according as he has made thee swear. Verse 7.
And Joseph went up to bury his father, and with him went all up the servants of Pharaoh.
So you have the servants of Pharaoh going up with Joseph. Go ahead.
The elders of his house and all the elders of the land of Egypt.
So you have Pharaoh's servants. You have the elders of Egypt. So you have Egyptians going up to the land of Canaan, as well as Joseph. Verse 8.
And all the house of Joseph, and his brethren, and his father's house, only their little ones, and their flocks, and their herds, they left in the land of Goshen.
So you have a mixed multitude here going up to bury Joseph's father, Jacob. You have Israelites, and you have Egyptians. But let's jump down to verse 11. Because as they're going down, you have the Canaanites looking at all this that's taking place, then mourning before Jacob. And this is what they had to say about it. Verse 11.
And when the inhabitants of the land, the Canaanites, saw the mourning in the floor of Atad, they said, "This is a grievous mourning to the
To the
Egyptians."
what?
To the Egyptians.
So even though you had Israelite people here and you had Egyptians, Canaanites only saw, since they saw only black people, they just assumed it was all Egyptians. Why? Because the Israelites are black people. If it was white people and black people, there would be no need to make a statement as bold as this. And when the inhabitants of the land, the Canaanites, saw the mourning in the floor of Atad, they said, "This is a grievous mourning to the Egyptians." But we just read that it was Israelites and Egyptians who came up there. But the Canaanites didn't know that. They just saw a group of black people and assumed, hey, that's just my brother, the Egyptians. They mourning down there. Keep reading.
And they said, this is a grievous mourning to the Egyptians, wherefore the name of it was called Abel Mizraim.
Okay, go ahead.
Which is beyond Jordan.
So from here we're going to turn over to Exodus chapter 2. Because like I said, this is the Israelites' black history through the Bible. We're identifying these people by color right now. So Exodus chapter 2, and we're going to read about Moses and his interactions with the Egyptians. Exodus chapter 2, we're going to pick it up at verse 1. When you get there, go ahead and read.
And there went a man of the house of Levi, and took to wife a daughter of Levi.
Mm-hmm.
And the woman conceived and bare a son. And when she saw him that he was a goodly child, she hid him 3 months. And when she could no longer hide him, she took him an ark of bulrushes, and daubed it with slime and with pitch, and put the child therein. And she laid it in the flags by the river's brink.
So what's going on here is that, generations after Joseph had done and passed away, you have a new Pharaoh in town. And he personally does not like the Israelites. Why? Because we don't die, we multiply. And he feared the Egyptians. He feared the Israelites. And he's like, you know what? We got to kill off the men. Because that's how you build your nation, with the men. So we're going to kill off every man possible. What are we going to do? If you have a child, if you see a male child, you put him in the river. So now, you basically kill him. So now, in chapter 2, you see this woman, she bore a son. It was a Levite. And she saw something good in this child, evidently. That's why she said she took for him. She said, when she saw that he was a goodly child, she hid him for 3 months. So she tried her best, try to play it off. But eventually, she had to put him in the river. But in verse 4, go ahead and read what happens.
And his sister stood afar off, to wit, what would be done to him. And the daughter of Pharaoh came down to wash herself at the river, and her maidens walked along by the river's side. And when she saw the ark among the flags, she sent her maid to fetch it.
So, the daughter of Pharaoh saw this child, and she said, when she saw the ark among the flags, she sent her maid to fetch it. She saw it. She went and grabbed it. She basically commanded someone to go get it for her. Verse 6.
And when she had opened it, she saw the child, and behold, the babe wept. And she had compassion on him, and said, "This is one of the Hebrews' children."
And she knew this was an Israelite boy. Hebrew, Israelite, same thing. So she knew this was a Hebrew child, and she decided, and she had compassion upon that child. And because she had compassion, verse 7.
Then said his sister to Pharaoh's daughter, "Shall I go and call to thee a nurse of a Hebrew woman, that she may nurse the child for thee?"
Go ahead.
And Pharaoh's daughter said to her, "Go." And the maid went and called the child's mother.
So child's mother put her in the little basket or whatever, had her go and put him in the river. And then now Pharaoh's daughter sees it, has compassion upon the child, brings him out. And now, one of the nurses said, "Hey, you want me to get someone?" Well, one of the servants said, "You want me to go get a nurse for this child?" Pharaoh's daughter's like, "Yeah." So what she do? She just went and got the child's mother. That's perfect. In verse 8 it says, and Pharaoh's daughter said to her, go. And the maid went and called the child's mother. Verse 9.
And Pharaoh's daughter said unto her, take this child away and nurse it for me, and I will give thee thy wages.
Now the mother's getting paid just to raise her own child now. And keep in mind, this is a Hebrew boy. Go ahead.
And the woman took the child and nursed it. And the child grew, and she brought him unto Pharaoh's daughter, and he became her son. And she called his name Moses. And she said, behold, I drew him out of the water.
Now, you have a Hebrew boy under the impression that he is Pharaoh's daughter. Now, Pharaoh don't like the Israelites. He got a decree to kill all the boys. If he wanted them dead, there would be no way we'd have a Hebrew boy in Pharaoh's house. No way. Instead, he was given the disguise as an Egyptian. That's what's going on here. Because the Pharaoh's daughter already knew it was a Hebrew child, and he said, "You know what? I'm gonna have someone nurse it." And instead of evidently, Pharaoh didn't know that it was a Hebrew child. She kept that to herself. But the daughter knew. So time goes by, and Moses getting older, and he sees the affliction of his people by the taskmasters. One taskmaster evidently was hurting, the Israelites so bad to the point that Moses got mad, and he went and he killed the taskmaster. Just giving you a little background information. But jump down to verse 15, because this is what happened soon afterwards. When you get there, go ahead and read.
Now when Pharaoh heard this thing, he sought to slay Moses. But Moses fled from the face of Pharaoh and dwelt in the land of Midian. And he sat down by a well.
So once he found out that Moses done killed an Egyptian, one of the taskmasters, now Pharaoh is furious. But he wasn't furious when a Hebrew was in his house, right? No, because in his mind it was an Egyptian. It wasn't until later that he realized the real identity of this child, a Hebrew Israelite, a black child in the midst of black people, but not of the same nationality. One is of Ham, the other is of Shem. But it reads, now when Pharaoh heard this thing, he sought to slay Moses. But Moses fled from the face of Pharaoh and dwelt in the land of Midian, and he sat down by a well. Keep going.
Now the priest of Midian had 7 daughters, and they came and drew water, and filled the troughs to water their father's flock. And the shepherds came and drove them away. But Moses stood up and helped them, and watered their flock. And when they came to Reuel, their father, he said, how is it that ye are come so soon today?
So Moses now is helping these daughters, these women, by the well, helping them gather water and so forth. And when the daughters came back to their father, he's like, man, how was you able to do all the tasks so quickly? Because evidently it takes longer, but now they got the support of a man helping around. But it says in verse 18, and when they came to Reuel, their father, he said, how is it that ye are come so soon today? Verse 19.
And they said, an Egyptian delivered us out of the hands of the shepherd.
A what?
An Egyptian.
But Moses is a Hebrew. But even like I said, from the outside looking in by complexion, you would assume it's a Hamite. That's an Egyptian. But in reality, it's an Israelite. Why? Because we're the same complexion. But it says, and they said, an Egyptian delivered us out of the hand of the shepherd. Go ahead.
And also drew water enough for us, and watered the flock.
Right. So let's keep going. Let's turn over to... We're going to turn over to Amos chapter 9. Because we liken Israel to Egypt a lot in this lesson. But God also likens us to another nationality. Let's turn over to Amos chapter 9. We're going to read one verse here, verse 7. When you get there, go ahead and read.
Are ye not as children of the Ethiopians unto me, O children of Israel?
To the children, so he says in Amos chapter 9, verse 7, he says, are ye not as the children of the Ethiopians unto me, O children of Israel? Why would he liken us to the Ethiopians? Be mindful of the fact that the Ethiopians are just another son of Ham. That's the Cush. That's the Cushites. More black people he's likening us to. Now, if you look in modern day time, when we look at the Egyptians, they don't look black. But if you do your history, look at the Islamic conquest of Egypt, where they wiped out all the real black people that were in Egypt. And you have this new nationality of people there. They're not the real Egyptians anymore. But he has us likening us to Ethiopians now, and they still are very much so black today, brothers and sisters. So be mindful of that. Finish that out.
O children of Israel, said the Lord, have not I brought up Israel out of the land of Egypt, and the Philistines from Caphtor, and the Syrians from Ker? Behold, the eyes
That's it on that.
Okay.
So we're looking at the Israelites, them being a black people, and God, we've seen us being, likened unto the Egyptians. We're going to see that further in the lesson also. And now God is also likening us into the Ethiopians, another group of black people. Because we saw in the Bible dictionary, he said that Ham was the progenitor of the black races. Not the Negroes, which are the Israelites, but, the Ethiopians, the Egyptians, the Libyans, and the Canaanites. So let's turn over to Hosea chapter 11. We're going to read one verse here, verse 1. Hosea chapter 11 and verse 1. When you get there, go ahead and read.
Hosea 11. When Israel was a child, then I loved him, and called my son out of Egypt.
Right. So in verse 1 it says, when Israel was a child, then I loved him, and called my son out of Egypt. Now, we've seen Israel be in Egypt. But is that talking about them per se? Let's turn over to Matthew chapter 2. Matthew chapter 2, we're going to pick it up at verse 1. When you get there, go ahead and read.
Now when Jesus was born in Bethlehem of Judea, in the days of Herod the king, behold, there came wise men from the east to Jerusalem.
So Jesus was born, and Herod the king, in his mind, he's like, keep going.
Saying, where is he that is born king of the Jews?
Because in his mind, there's prophecy saying that there's going to be a son that is born, talking about in Isaiah. Plenty of scripture talking about how Jesus is going to be born. He's going to be king of the Jews. And he's talking to the wise men himself. He says, where is he that is born king of the Jews? Go ahead.
For we have seen his star in the east, and are come to worship him. When Herod the king had heard these things, he was troubled, and all Jerusalem with him.
Well, the wise men were asking Herod this, my apologies, but still, Herod was concerned about this because he himself was king. He don't want his government taken from him. So ultimately, he says, when Herod the king had heard these things, he was troubled, and all Jerusalem was with him. Well, verse 4.
And when he had gathered all the chief priests and scribes of the people together, he demanded of them where Christ should be born.
So now he wants to know, where is this guy at? I want to know for myself. And really, it ain't for him. Like, he's happy that Jesus is being born. In reality, he wants him dead. Figure out where he is so we can slay him. Well, verse 5.
And they said unto him, in Bethlehem of Judea, for thus it is written by the prophet.
So they knew that he would be born in Bethlehem, Judea. Why? Because it's prophecy. Everything concerning Jesus, that's why he's so factual, is the fact that he was prophesied in the old times. And Moses, according to Luke chapter 24, he said it concerning me. He had to fulfill certain things concerning him, things written in the law of Moses, in the Psalms, in the prophets. Because he was prophesied of. And they said unto him in Bethlehem of Judea. The Old Testament, what you read in Hosea 11, verse 1 just now, gave you the direct place he would be born, in Bethlehem. So who are we talking about in Hosea chapter 11? Was it talking about the Israelites? We're talking about Jesus, but in reality, Jesus himself was an Israelite. He's a seed of David. He was an Israelite, and he himself was also a black person. Keep going.
We're at 4?
Verse
5. Verse 6. And thou Bethlehem in the land of Judah art not the least among the princes of Judah. For out of thee shall come a governor that shall rule my people Israel.
And we're talking about Jesus here. That's what Hosea chapter 11 was talking about. But let's keep going. We'll turn over to Revelations chapter 1. Because we're talking about Jesus right here, an Israelite, our Lord and Savior. And John gets a vision in Revelations. He gets a vision. He sees the Master himself. So we're going to pick it up. Revelation chapter 1, pick it up at verse 13.
And in the midst of the 7 candlesticks, one like unto the Son of Man, clothed with a garment down to the foot, and girt about the paps with a golden girdle.
So this man is basically describing his apparel. But keep going.
His head and his hairs were white like wool, as white as snow, and his eyes were as a flame of fire.
And keep in mind in verse 13 when it says Son of Man, it's talking about Jesus himself. It's talking about God. But it says, and one like unto the Son of Man, clothed with garment down to the foot, and girt with the paps with a golden girdle. His head and his hairs were white like wool, and as white as snow, and his eyes were as a flame of fire. But verse 15.
And his feet like unto fine brass, as if they burned in a furnace, and his voice as the sound of many waters.
And it says his feet onto fine brass. If we look at any form of brass, it's a dark complexion. Look at this right here. That's what that's what brass would look like, fine brass. But then he takes it a step further and said, and his feet like unto fine brass as if they burned in a furnace. So then he tells you that it's also burned. Anything burned is black, brothers and sisters. That's just facts. You can't take something, burn it, and it be white. Like, where does that make sense at? We want to believe in science. Explain that science to me. Nah, Jesus was black. That's, like I'm saying, brother, it says Israel's black history through the Bible. That's what we're learning about. Because just because we're black does not mean we identify with African American. Because you have African and you have American. That's two different. How can you just mix that and assume that's what you are? When Chinese people come over here, they don't say they're Chinese American. They say they're Chinese. When Germans come over here, they don't say I'm German American. They say they're German. So who are we when we're not even African to say we're African American? That don't make no sense. So let's turn over to Acts chapter 21. Actually, no, let's turn over to Lamentations chapter 4. Lamentations chapter 4. And we're going to look at the conditions of Israel, during a time where they were obviously disobeying God and they were reaping some punishment for it. Lamentations chapter 4. Because even the word lamentation or someone lamenting, it means they're mourning or they're under some deep grief. Lamentations chapter 4, we're going to pick it up at verse 1. When you get there, go ahead and read.
How is the gold become dim? How is the most fine gold changed? The stones of the sanctuary are poured out in the top of every street.
Now we're talking about the condition of Israel. Like at one point, they were meant to be set upon high above all nations. And now we look at Israel today. Even in this time, they're experiencing some lows and lows. But we're at the peak of it now, because no one respects a black man no more. We get pulled over, and our first instinct is put both hands on the wheel, because we are not trying to get shot.
Right.
But we're looking at the condition of Israel right now in chapter 4, and it says, how is the gold become dim? How is the most fine gold changed? Because like I said, we're meant to be above high, put on high above all nations. It's a house of most fine gold changed. The stones of the sanctuary are poured out in the top of every street. Verse 2.
The precious sons of Zion, comparable to fine gold, how are they esteemed as earthen pitchers, the work of the hands of the potter?
Right. Something compared to fine gold, now we're earthen pitchers. Like, think about that, the degree of value. Instead of being gold, which is great on verse 7.
Her Nazarites were purer than snow. They were whiter than milk.
Now it's talking about their righteousness here. It says, her Nazarites were purer than snow. They were whiter than milk. Go ahead.
They were more ruddy in body than rubies.
And now it's talking about, their physical apparel, because it says, it says they were more ruddy, and ruddy is more of a dark red here. And that's what ruddy, that's the definition of ruddy. It was a dark red. And they were more ruddy in body than sapphires. Go ahead. Verse 7.
Her Nazarite were purer than snow. They were whiter than milk. They were more ruddy in body than rubies. Their polishing was of sapphire.
That was our beginning state, basically, before all this trouble was taking place. And it says their polishing was of sapphire. Sapphire is also a very dark color. But verse 8.
Their visage is blacker than a coal.
At first, we're looking good. But now it says their visage, and visage is another word for appearance, is blacker than coal. Go ahead.
They are not known in the streets. Their skin cleaveth to their bones. It is withered. It is become like a stick.
That's what we look. That's the aftermath. It is withered. It has become like a stick. Turn over to the next chapter, chapter 5. Pick it up at verse 10. No, pick it up at verse 1.
Remember, O Lord, what is come upon us. Consider and behold our reproach.
Right, because I'm talking about, the conditions that Israel is in. We're not looking so good right now. Jump down to verse 5.
Our necks are under persecution. We labor and have no rest.
Jump verse 10.
Our skin was black like an oven because of the terrible famine.
Our skin was black like an oven because of the terrible famine. We sick. Our skin is withered, and we're experiencing a terrible famine. So no white person under poor conditions gets blacker or gets black like an oven. Instead, really, white people get pale, correct? They turn whiter. Just like us black people turn blacker, they are to turn whiter. So you cannot attach a white person to these characteristics given to the Israelites now. Like we saw, your Europeans, those come from Japheth. But us Israelites, we come from another lineage. And we're not Hamites, instead we come from Shem. That's why we said, like I said, I'm repeated in that dictionary, where it said, Ham was the progenitor of the dark races, but not the Negroes. It's very key that we take note of that, because even though I'm black, I'm not a Hamite. I am the descendant of the Israelites. The priest, the holy nation of priests that God was supposed to set on high. But let's turn over to Acts chapter 21. We're going to go to Acts chapter 13.
Okay.
We're going to have a little more fun here. Acts chapter 13, we're going to read one verse here. Acts chapter 13 and verse 1. When you get there, go ahead and read it.
Now there were in the church that was at Antioch certain prophets and teachers.
So in Antioch, there were certain prophets and teachers. Go ahead.
As Barnabas and Simeon, that was called Niger.
Called what?
Niger.
Called Niger. Let me pull up my next reference here. Niger. And this is, you can look it up anywhere. This is dictionary.com. I went ahead and just printed out the page. Look it up on your own time also. But it says, word origin and history for Niger. African nation, name for the river Niger, mentioned, by that name, 1520s. Probably an alteration by influence of Latin Niger, black. So in Latin roots, it really meant black. And that's what you see being attached to Simeon. It says right here, Now there were in the church that was at Antioch certain prophets and teachers, as Barnabas and Simeon, that was called Niger. Now these are prophets, teachers. Go ahead. And Simeon, that was called Niger. Go ahead.
And Lucius of Cyrene, and Manian, which had been brought up with Herod, the tetrarch, and Saul.
Okay. And now let's turn over to Acts chapter 2. It's Acts chapter 21. Because Paul was receiving some affliction himself, all just because he was preaching the gospel. All because he was just preaching the gospel. They didn't like him. Because he was trying to take away from the law. But really, he said himself in Acts chapter 24, he believed all things written in the law and the prophets. So, but at the same time, he went and he preached Jesus, because it's by the name of Jesus will be saved. And he's talking to the chief captain right now, because they're trying to do it, and he's trying to plead his case before him. So, pick it up at verse 37.
And as Paul was to be led into the castle, he said unto the chief captain, May I speak unto thee? Who said, Canst thou speak Greek?
So, Paul is trying to talk on his own behalf. And it says, and Paul was to be led into the castle. He said unto the chief captain, May I speak unto thee? Chief captain said, Canst thou speak Greek? Keep going.
Art not thou that Egyptian, which before these days made us an uproar, and led us out into the wilderness, 4,000 men that were murderers?
So, chief captain is talking to Paul and says, aren't you that Egyptian? Because even in Romans chapter 3, or all throughout Romans, Paul is always talking about, even in, Corinthians, he said, I'm a Hebrew, I'm an Israelite. He even breaks it down and says he's of the tribe of Benjamin. Breaks it down to which son he comes from, which tribe. So, but the chief captain is looking at him and assuming he's an Egyptian. Why? Because Paul is a black man. But he's not an Egyptian, he's an Israelite. Go ahead.
But Paul said, I am a man which am a Jew.
An Egyptian?
Which am a Jew.
An Ethiopian.
A Jew.
A Jew. Keep going.
Of Tarsus, a city in Sicilia, a citizen of no mean city. And I beseech thee, suffer me to speak unto the people.
He knew his identity. We don't know it today. But we need to come to this Bible and realize what our true history is. That's the title of the class of lesson. It is The Israelites' Black History Through the Bible. Keep going.
And when he had given him license, Paul stood on the stairs and beckoned with the hand unto the people. And when there was made a great silence, he spake unto them in the Hebrew tongue.
He spoke unto them in the Hebrew tongue, not the Egyptian tongue. He didn't know Egyptian. He spoke to them in the Hebrew tongue, in his native language. Right. And since we're going to turn over to our last scripture, I'm going to throw this in there, Exodus chapter 4. We're going to see another thing about Moses. Because we're talking about Israel being a black people here. Exodus chapter 4, and we're going to pick it up at verse 4. Because Moses got to go, he got to go talk to Pharaoh, and he got to go talk to the people. And he's like, yo, you got to show them, you got to give me a way for me to prove myself to these people. Let them know I'm rocking with you. Verse 4.
And the Lord said unto Moses, Put forth thine hand and take it by the tail. And he put forth his hand and caught it, and it became a rod in his hand.
So the first thing he said, the first sign was the rod. If you throw it down, it's going to become a snake. But when you pick it up, guess what? But when he picked it back up, it became a rod. Verse 5.
That they may believe that the Lord God of their fathers, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob, hath appeared unto thee.
Go ahead in verse 6.
And the Lord said furthermore unto him, Put now thine hand into thy bosom. And he put his hand into his bosom. And when he took it out, behold, it was leprous as snow.
So when he took his hand and put it into his bosom, and he put it out, look, it was leprous as snow. That means it was white, brothers and sisters.
Right.
If your whole body is white, and you put your hand in straight and it becomes white, you won't be really shocked much. But instead, it was black and it came out white. That's why he was shocked. But the title of the class is The Israelites' Black History Through the Bible. Us Israelites is black. I hope someone got some understanding. Peace.
Peace.